I'm thrilled to be here and meet all of you and see so many different faces, different industries, different age groups, the diversity. It's wonderful. I am a true believer in that you can be an entrepreneur at any age and at any stage of your career. It was also great to hear the women this morning talking about starting their companies when they are just starting families or when their kids are off to college or at different stages of their life and career. But I definitely think that if you have that spark in you, it never goes away. So hopefully you have an opportunity to take advantage of that. And before we start, I just wanted to quickly get an understanding of how many of you have companies already that you've started. Okay, and how many of you are thinking about starting a company? Okay. What are some other reasons you might have come today if it's not specifically to be an entrepreneur? Do you want to?
I'm just I'm a software developer and currently I'm bored with my job.
Okay.
Start trying to explore what are the opportunities.
Wonderful. And you can be an entrepreneur even in another organization. I truly believe that. Maybe you're starting a new division or a new product or some new initiative. So all of this applies even as an individual.
Hi,
yes.
I am an attorney here at Fenwick. Welcome. This is great. Thank you very much for presenting. I think brand awareness is it goes across industries and it's such a general term. Whether you're a lawyer or an entrepreneur, I think you want to have a brand of your own, that a public brand that the way you would want people to see you. So that's the reason I wanted to.
Wonderful. Absolutely. So I'll give you a little background on myself. I have founded my own PR firm about 16 years ago, and I don't recall who it was on stage. Actually, I think it was you, Samira, who said that they couldn't take their job anymore, so up and quit. I did call my husband on a Monday, and I was like, I am not staying for the rest of this day. And he was like, come on, let's come home, relax, we'll talk about it. So I quit the next day. So there wasn't a lot of planning when I started my own company. Being in the service industry, it's a little easier. There are not as many startup costs. But you often do find that women in particular are much less likely to seek out funding or to seek out capital and will self-start their own business. So I think branding can be really critical and really important if you are not only building your own brand and your own company, but if you are seeking capital or seeking investment. There was a lot of discussion this morning in the sessions about, does Sand Hill Road care if it's profitable or not profitable? I do think that when they look at women and women-owned businesses, the standard is higher. So you need to have the numbers, and you need to have the branding, and you need to have the business plan. And often you need to have all of that before you can get any investment at all. So I can help you with the branding end of it. So I have been doing this for about 16 years. I'm under my own umbrella, but about 20 years, including other firms that I've worked with both in-house and at Edelman Public Relations. Just to give you an idea, the clients that I've worked with are startups where it's literally fresh off the napkin, like they haven't finished copying the algorithm into the computer, to one of the companies I'm working with today is a multinational $7 billion publicly traded company. So I think that this really applies wherever you are on the spectrum. I'll also say that I want this to be an interactive session. This is for you. So if you have questions, stop me, ask, don't wait. I think also people will benefit from hearing the questions that you ask, so don't be afraid to interrupt me or jump right in. Okay, so branding. I think, we're all familiar with general brands. Like we think about when we walk into a store, we go shopping, we have the brands that we love and brands that we admire, but we don't always kind of dissect, why do I like this brand? Why do I shop at this place? And we don't always think about it when we're building our own company, especially entrepreneurs in the tech industry are so focused on the technology that they don't always focus on the brand. There are those companies that do the opposite, where they focus so much on the brand, they forget to actually develop the software so that it works. And I want to talk about branding in kind of the global sense of what it means, because it's not just a mark or a name or a visual. It's so much more than that. So what does it include beyond the traditional? It is obviously the visual. It can also be the physical experience. You know, if somebody dropped you today into a Starbucks, but there was no sign that said Starbucks, would you know if you were in Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts? 100%. You wouldn't mistake it from the smell, from the signage, from the products, from the service, from those green aprons. All of those things are emblematic of the brand. They are essentially part of the brand essence, whether or not it's formal. Obviously, the product is important, but when you think about how many products there are in the market, I mean, I was amazed when she was talking about, you know, disrupting the beverage industry, because if you ever walk into a supermarket or you walk into a store and there are just thousands of beverages on the shelf, so to be able to brand yourself and differentiate yourself in such a crowded market space is incredibly important. But oftentimes we're operating in spaces where we can't actually differentiate the product. Like, if you have a product that's different, I'm not going to say that it's easy, but it's golden to have a product that's very different. But maybe you're in public relations, where essentially there's no secret formula, there's no algorithm, there's no patent. I can't really change the nature of the business itself, but I can change how we conduct it. I can change the experience of working with us. I can change the people who work in our office. So all of those things can be part of the branding. So I'd love to hear, what kind of companies are you working with or working for? Obviously, this is a law firm. So you are part of a larger organization. I would assume that as an individual, you may not have an opportunity to really brand the organization, but how do you brand yourself within the organization? What kind of law do you practice, or what's your role here?
So I'm a technology transactions lawyer, and I help businesses in their licensing agreements, like software, hardware licensing, basically anything that's commercial, from the time they conceive of an idea of a business to actually taking it to the market and everything in between. So
what are some of the things that you do to differentiate you from another partner at the firm or another attorney at the firm?
That's what I'm here to
That's what you're here to learn. Okay. Anybody? Yes.
So I'm in tech space, but my true passion is helping women into the financials, personal finance, managing their own, kids' future or their own retirement, all of that, right? So what I am trying to, how I'm trying to, or at least the brand that it has helped me in technology space when I was in between jobs is raising my hand, not, feeling shy that someone's watching me, someone's judging me. I think when I let that go, let the guards go down, that really helped me raise in my, technology space. The similar thing I'm doing in, a lot of times women, hey, I don't know about finance or I don't have time, versus we can do this too. There's very few women. I think that's where I'm trying to establish my brand as a woman, as a colored woman in a space that's not many of us are there. But I'm here to, learn more things from you. So be bold about it. That's one thing. But then your boldness shouldn't come across as aggression. Or how could you make people trust you because you really have good intentions for the person? I think that's where some of the, challenges that I'm having with my brand. I come from a good place in heart, but I think my boldness can be taken as aggression.
So it's very interesting, I think that, as you said, asking questions is incredibly important. The first speaker today, when she talked about kind of surrounding herself with experts or bringing in people that are knowledgeable, I do think that often, in particular, women discount their own knowledge and their ability and second guess themselves. So I think it's good to have some swagger. And without a doubt, women do their homework. When you look at women and they're asked to take on a new job or a promotion, women are often apt to say, I don't think I'm qualified. And men will usually say, I don't know how to do it, but I'll figure it out.
They don't even say that.
They don't admit it.
Know.
Yes. Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. But I have no doubt that the women in this room are capable of learning new things, of absorbing information, and often having that humility means that we're also open to the advisement and direction of others, but also strong-willed enough to stand our own ground when we know that things are right. So let's talk about some of these cues. What is this? If we're talking about branding.
Tiffany blue.
It is Tiffany blue. And I think it's important to note that most people know that it is Tiffany blue. It's just a color. This is just a square. So branding can start from something as simple as a color. And there are probably 10 other brands that I could put their color up here that you might be able to recognize, but clearly Tiffany blue is very iconic. If we're in this supermarket, what supermarket are we in? Whole Foods. We are in Whole Foods. There is something very different about a physical store or a physical experience when you walk in. It doesn't always have to be, and there's nothing here, I don't think, I tried to delete them all, any signage that says Whole Foods, but you know that this is not a Safeway or an Albertsons or a King's or some of the other supermarkets, just by the feeling you get when you walk into that store. So you can create that branding experience in so many ways.
Feeling now. Amazon is all in the front of the store.
Yes. It has changed. It has changed. How many of you have noticed when you walk into stores now, the smell, scent, marketing? Many stores, she's not a teenager anymore, my daughter's 18, but there was nothing I would hate more than going into some of these stores. And I'm like, first of all, it's dark in here and I can't see anything. And it smells. I'm going to walk out like smelling like this. But it is part of the brand experience that so many people love. And at the same time, there are other senses, the lighting or the smells in other stores that I love, that I would recognize as soon as I walk into. So I don't want you to think of branding as just the mark or how it looks. It can also be the bottle or the shape. Who knows what this brand is? Method. Immediately. Do we know anything about what's inside this bottle other than the fact that it's soap?
Cleaner ingredients.
Maybe it's cleaner, maybe it's all natural, organic. But I think part of what made Method different on the supermarket shelves or on shelves was just the shape of the packaging. So that's where, again, if you can't necessarily differentiate the product, can you differentiate the brand in some other way? What about the language? Do we all know this language? All right, we've got Starbucks here, which I still cannot for the life of me. I'm just like, give me a medium. Geek Squad or Genius Bar. Where is the Genius Bar? Where's the Geek Squad? Best Buy. Okay. So even the language that you use for the same potential service can be part of your branding. I think the Genius Bar is a clear signifier for Apple. You know, when you walk in, who are you talking to? That's part of their brand persona, regardless of who you're speaking to within the organization. If we were to say these are two tech companies, which tech companies are these? Apple and Facebook. Okay. So again, it can even be the uniform. It can be the clothing. What is that signal when you have a CEO step onto the stage in a hoodie or have someone step onto the stage with a turtleneck? So again, branding isn't just about the design, but it can be about the whole experience. I know there are a few men in the room, but for the ladies in the room, you could probably pick out the price order of these products. What do you think is the lowest end product here?
L'Oreal.
Okay, L'Oreal is actually the lower end. Definitely something you'd find in a CVS or in a Walgreens or in a drugstore. Olay is trying to elevate its brand. That's the second. What do you think is the third? And the fourth? Does any of us know what's in any of these jars? No. But one is 11. Hope. That's an excellent answer. Excellent answer. I love it. But this one is $11 and this one is about $130. And the price differential comes down to branding, brand recognition, and that allows you to also fluctuate your pricing. and who it's going to appeal to, and what's going to be a luxury brand versus what's going to be a drugstore brand.
I'm curious, are
Yes.
the ingredients the same though? Like,
I did not do the research on the ingredients.
The answer is basically yes.
I mean, for most of these creams, they're generally the same. But I think, obviously, different brands have different, ingredients or different active ingredients. But what I'm trying to say is you can be in the same category and differentiate in a different way. It's not necessarily what's in the jar, but what is the experience of even buying that jar? Where do you buy that jar? Is it in a spa? Is it in a drugstore? Is it in a supermarket? Is it at the beauty counter in Bloomingdale's? All of those things can be part of your brand strategy and not just what goes inside that container. Chick-fil-A. How many of you are Chick-fil-A fans? The waffle fries. I mean,
I like the sandwiches.
okay. What do we know about Chick-fil-A?
They're closed on Sunday.
They're closed on Sunday. Does anyone know why? This is a big part of it. Does anyone know why?
Yeah.
For religious reasons.
The
It did.
founder.
The founder started out and wanted to allow his employees to worship on Sundays and have a day of rest. That's one of the founding principles. What else do we know about Chick-fil-A? What was some of the controversy they got into in the last couple of years?
The gay.
They were supporting anti-LGBT groups and using company funds to support religious causes. There is a foundation at this company of Christian beliefs and practicing Christianity even through their work. They're not the only company. Hobby Lobby is well known for doing that, for trying to change their health care program so that they would not be supporting birth control for women. Whatever your feeling is about this company, as many of us that there are that might be turned off to Chick-fil-A, even if the waffle fries are great, there may be that many who are turned on to Chick-fil-A because they have these principles or beliefs as part of the ethos of the company. I can tell you, so Chick-fil-A is not big in New York, and they opened one literally across the street from my office. And we had a big debate about whether or not we should have a company outing or order in from Chick-fil-A. And we said there needs to be some sort of like carbon offset program, like for every hamburger you buy, we will donate $1 to an LGBT group or something. So we did not do a company outing Chick-fil-A, but it has definitely influenced my purchasing behavior about whether or not I walk into this establishment based on the principles of the organization. And it can be, again, something that attracts you to a brand or something that repels you from a brand. So certainly, again, part of the branding. So let's talk about why you need a brand. Obviously, when I deal with tech companies, one of the things that they often say is, but we have the best product, right? But we have the best product. And I say, but no one cares. And why does no one care? Because they don't know your name, they don't trust you, you don't have credibility, you don't have distribution. I can't even buy it off the shelf somewhere at the stores I go to. You're too small. I'm worried that the company will go out of business. There's so many different reasons why the product is not enough alone. So what does having a brand do for you? It definitely helps drive customer recognition and acquisition. So if I walk into a store and I see a brand, even if it is on a product I don't know, eyeglasses are a great example of that. How many of you have bought a pair of designer eyeglasses before? You've probably paid a big premium. But if you know anything about the eyeglass industry, 90% of the eyeglasses are basically manufactured by about 3 or 4 different firms. So that the Walmart eyeglasses that cost $50 are probably produced right next to the Gucci or the Kate Spade eyeglasses in the same factory. But you see the brand, and maybe you like the style, I'm not saying you don't, but you see the brand and you automatically have an association with it, an association of quality or association of luxury or an association of prestige, or maybe this is high design. But that brand gives credibility or credence to the new product line as well. So it's not just about the existing product line, but what does it say? You know, if I go to buy, my son is very into sports, and I go into Modell's and I see that he needs a football helmet, and Nike has a football helmet, and some unknown brand I've never heard of, maybe it's the Modell's, you know, internal brand, it's the Modell's football helmet. Which one am I going to buy? Why?
It's cool.
It's cooler. He would definitely appreciate it. I know the brand. I trust the brand. I assume that if they made it, it is quality. I assume that if they made it, they know what they're doing. They have credibility in the sports market. So it gives you a lot more. It can also be create a competitive differentiator. Again, going back to that Method story, Method has a brand, Palmolive. So they saved a couple of ducks. I mean, for how many years have we seen that commercial where they're washing a duck covered in oil? Like, it was Dawn. Okay, there you go. But it can create, the brand can be the differentiator, even if it's not in the product itself. Definitely sets expectations for new products and services. Apple is the best example of that. The fact that we are willing to go out and buy a $1,000 phone or put ourselves on a waiting list before anyone has even touched it because it's Apple, because we know the brand and we have an expectation of what that's going to be. Definitely strengthening your loyalty, enhancing credibility when you have a strong brand. Resilience in crisis. I deal with a lot of this. A lot of what we do is crisis communications. And how many of you have received a letter in the mail that has said, oh, your account has been breached, we're so sorry, you should change your password at some point? Did you change brands? Did you stop using that service? Probably not. Part of it is we become immune to these security breaches, but part of it is you still somehow trust the brand. You still somehow have decided that this bank or this educational institution or this credit card company still deserves your business, and it creates that resilience in a crisis scenario. Target's a good example of that. Target had one of the worst security breaches of credit cards of any retail outlet. Millions of people had their credit card information stolen from Target, but how many of us stopped shopping at Target? Did it affect their stock price? Not at all. But for other companies that don't have that brand loyalty, it can plummet their stock price, it can plummet their sales, it can definitely roll back our trust in that brand. Yes?
You mentioned it did not affect the stock price. I understand it's the brand, but also is it because it also caters to, it's not the luxury brand? Would that be a reason that, yeah, people will anyway continue?
Like if it's cheap, I'll still go there? Yes.
There's another situation, right?
So I think that definitely it can have an impact, but even luxury brands come into situations where they have a crisis and they're not believed. Volkswagen, maybe middle of the road, not luxury, but I think hearing about the lying and the emissions testing and all of the deceit that went on in the organization, if you are a buyer who is conscious about the environment and that drives your decision-making processes, you probably won't buy that brand again. If you bought the Volkswagen because you liked the way it looked or you liked the way it drove, maybe you don't care about that one element because you were like, emissions, not so important to me. So I think it depends on each situation, but having a strong brand and having that customer loyalty can definitely help you get through a crisis faster and recover from a crisis faster. Starbucks has been in the news also. For all of the incidents of whether it was racial profiling or other issues. How many of you have stopped buying coffee at Starbucks? Okay, we've got one person. It never started. Okay. But did it change your mind about the company?
Yeah, it did. Forget his name, the guy who's CEO.
Howard Schultz?
Yeah, he's been in the news about a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Just the whole thing together, I just didn't like it. So it wasn't that important to me to have Starbucks coffee anyway. And I said, I could go somewhere else.
Well, first of all, I applaud you for using your wallet to show your support for different companies. I hope that it doesn't mean that if I still go to Starbucks that I'm supporting racial bias. But I think that the company overall has made a lot of effort to make social reform and social issues part of their brand, that they were forgiven fairly quickly by the public. It's still kind of in our consciousness, we're still knowledgeable of it, but they made such an effort, I think, to reverse that. I don't think it'll ever disappear, because when you're in retail and you have thousands of locations, you can't control every interaction between customers and employees. They have gotten smaller. But I think for most people, it did not change their overall perception of the brand, because all of the other factors were strong. So it can help you through a crisis. It can't help you avoid every crisis. And certainly some customers will decide that they won't continue to support it. Okay. So we did talk about establishing a price premium. It certainly makes a difference. How many of you have ever used a subscription service like a Stitch Fix or Netflix? Okay. But if I think Netflix is a good example, because Netflix every couple of years kind of ratcheted up their price or lowered. They had different systems, but you probably stuck with the brand. However, there are not a lot of alternatives in the market, so that's a little harder. So you might be able to go to Amazon Video, or you might be able to go to Hulu, but you don't have the Netflix competitor that's a few dollars more. Whereas other brands can, if they're competing in the market but have a price premium, if they can fill in all of the other things, you can probably get a higher valuation both for your products and for the company. I am notoriously cheap myself, but I do often buy at Cole Haan, if you know the brand. And one of the reasons I always go back to them is I discovered that you can bring a product back to Cole Haan years later and they will replace it and honor it. You've worn that purse, you've worn that shoe, they keep you in their database, and you can come back. They stand behind their products for whatever reason. And to me, that has made me more loyal to the brand, because I know if I spend a few $100s on this item, I have a guarantee that I will get worth out of it over time, versus if I go into a Macy's or a Bloomingdale's and pick up a brand that I don't know. So I prefer to actually go to the store and buy directly from the brand because of that experience. It can also increase your valuation of the company itself, especially when you're looking for investors. One of the things that we do often with companies that come to us is they're looking for investments, and we help them look larger than they are. We help them look more established than they are. We help them look more credible than they are. And that helps increase the valuation. That brand equity is something that really can put dollars on that bottom line when someone's looking to invest in the company. And often in Silicon Valley, that's all they have, because there's no profit, there's no revenue. Sometimes there's not even a product. Yes. Okay. So what happens when the CEO is the brand? I think often when you're a small business, this is really true. Who is this gentleman? Do we all know him? Warren Buffett. What company is he CEO of? Berkshire Hathaway. Have any of us purchased a product from Berkshire or done any business with them? We probably have, but we don't even know, most people can't even name any of the subsidiaries or any of the companies that he holds, but we know him because he's so intertwined with the brand itself. What are some of the values or things that you associate with Warren Buffett?
Good investor.
Good investor? Wealth?
He reads a lot.
He reads a lot and very knowledgeable.
Lives a simple life.
A simple life, very humble. Those are things that we also then take and associate with the brand. And that's something that's important to understand, that oftentimes when the CEO and the brand are so intertwined, and especially in a small business, that happens very often. So if you trust me, you trust my company. If you trust the person who you meet who's heading up this organization, you think they're honest and they have integrity, you pass that on to everyone else, and that kind of glow that happens in the rest of the organization. What about Bill Gates? What do we know about Bill? Very smart. A philanthropist. Kind of a good citizen overall. Cares about politics, cares about people of the world, cares about a variety of issues. A lot of, I'm sorry?
Left Harvard.
Left Harvard, yes, an innovator. So again, those are things that we take with us and associate with the brand. You know, I was actually in a Best Buy the other day trying to buy a computer for my son, and I'm a hardcore Apple, but I didn't want to spend so much money on a 12-year-old. So I was saying to the woman in Best Buy, like, which laptop here would you suggest for my son? And she had all of these brands, some I heard of, some I didn't hear of. Some of them were like, I had never heard these names, but they were $300, $400, and she's telling me these are just as good as this Microsoft laptop. And I'm like, it has all the same features, and she's showing me it's the same RAM, the same processor, the same software platform. It'll give me service for a year. And I was like, I just don't trust it. And I am going to pay $300 more, $400 more because it's got Bill's name on it. Because I trust in that brand. I trust in Microsoft.
Crazy how we do that.
It is, but that's how it works. All right, but what happens when the CEO goes rogue? Okay, so Elon Musk, who's heard of some of the controversy about him lately? You read up on the news. Okay, so what has Elon done lately?
Well, the submarine incident, when the Thailand boys were trapped in a cave, he offered to bring a submarine, and then he got into kind of a contest. I won't say what kind of a contest with one of the
I'll say it. He called the diver who rescued them a pedophile because of his frustration over the diver's lack of admiration for the submarine he offered to use to rescue the boys. He also is recently on a radio show. It was actually I think it was taped, where he was smoking marijuana with the host of the show. Shareholders didn't exactly love that, and he had tweeted this summer, about having an investor to help him take the company Tesla private without actually having a company confirmed to do that, and violated disclosure laws, and the SEC has just fined him $20 million, his company $20 million, and had him removed from the position of chairman of the board.
And then we did the tweet about the SEC and the short sellers enrichment committee or something? I don't know.
Basically, we cannot control this man. No one can control this man. Genius, visionary, I think everybody agrees with that, but out of control. I'm very happy to not be his PR person because that would be extremely, extremely difficult. And Tesla did see it, and many of the companies he's worked with has seen people pull away from the company and pull away from the brand because of his association. So just as much as it can have a glow, it can also have a shadow, depending on the CEO. I mean, obviously, Elon Musk is not going to be homeless anytime soon. I think he's doing just fine. He has many, many companies. But his reputation definitely reflects on the companies he works with. Our friend Elizabeth Holmes. So she went from darling to nemesis of Silicon Valley, obviously, with her company. And again, here, I think, is a situation where you had all brand and no product. So you had the person, you had the persona, you had this company, you had this look and feel, you had this promise, you had this vision, but no one bothered to actually test the product, which is another issue. And the company just declared bankruptcy, insolvency. So unfortunately, what was once one of the first female-led unicorns in Silicon Valley is now out of business. Didn't do a lot to help us. It is a shame. And then there's this young woman. Does anyone know who she is? Stitch Fix. She's the founder of Stitch Fix. I love this picture. This is her ringing the bell on NASDAQ when they had their IPO, and she brought her 10-month-old baby with her. And I thought this is just a great symbol of when you live your brand. She is actually such an embodiment of who her clientele are. You know, young women in their 20s and 30s, women who are starting families, women who are busy, women who are trying to balance it all. And she's going to launch a company, she's going to IPO, she's going to bring her kid, and she's going to get the work done. And I think this is a great example of, you know, when you can live that brand and be that brand. But sometimes the brand stands alone, or sometimes the brand doesn't even need to have the product in the ad for you to know who it is. Are you all familiar with Colin Kaepernick? So I think this is really, really interesting case in branding. So if you're not very familiar with the story, so Colin, as a San Francisco 49ers quarterback, has been unemployed, or I should say former, because I think he's been unemployed now for about 2 years, from the time in 2016 when he started kneeling as part of a protest or support of the Black Lives Matter movement during the national anthem. And he became like an untouchable for so many organizations and for companies. I mean, if you have Trump tweeting about you and you have the NFL, you know, angry at you, like one of the most powerful organizations in the United States. And I think it is incredibly brave of Nike to decide to take up this individual and say he is going to be a symbol for our brand. But if you know Nike, who's their demographic? Who's their demographic? It's not women over 40. Okay. I mean, I do use their product, but it is the 18 to 35 kind of age range, I would say, is their core demographic. Their core demographic are also sports enthusiasts. This is also a generation of people who are much more socially conscious, much more liberal, much more focused on cause-related marketing and CEO and brand activism than other groups. So for Nike, this is not as controversial as it might have been for a different brand. And the numbers will yet to show. It's kind of too soon to know. But obviously, it sparked controversy on both ends. So again, we go back to that Chick-Fil-A example. There are people who are going to go there specifically because of their principles. There are people who burned Nike apparel specifically because of this ad. So you're going to have controversy on either end. And then you're also going to have people who are going to support it.
I think the other thing is also their clientele is of a generation where they maybe encourage a certain kind of rebellious behavior, if exactly what it says. If you stand
Absolutely.
for something, it's characteristic of it that, you know, if I'm standing for something, I'm ready to sacrifice whatever it takes to stand behind what I believe. And I think a lot of youngsters have more of that rebellious kind of sentiment and can relate to it. So I think it actually captures that really well, absolutely. Should have been in that meeting advocating for him. Okay, and then, I don't know if anyone knows this brand. I kind of didn't have an indication of it here. These are actually 2 Instagram posts from Bark & Co. If you are a dog lover, you may have come across them. Obviously, animals on the internet rule the world, and they are very well aware of it. So this company, Bark & Co., they're a subscription box service. If you have an animal, it may just be for dogs right now. They'll essentially, for $20 a month, kind of send you a package filled with treats and toys for your dog. And they have done an incredible job, I think, branding themselves. And part of it is kind of igniting that passion that people have and the love for their own animals and for their pets. And if you look at their Instagram, their Facebook, their Twitter handle, it's full of these adorable doggies, people with their humans, you know, having a great time. And it is not about the products at all. It is about like the lifestyle of the dog lover, the cute puppy you come home to, that feeling that they give you, those silly memes. They've done an excellent job with that. So it doesn't always have to be this kind of deep-rooted human interest, cause-related marketing, but it could just be indulging something that, you know, many, many people love. They do, by the way, have over $150 million in sales, so they're doing something very well.
How many of you know who this gentleman is? He's the CEO of Chobani. I don't want to butcher his last name, but Hamdi, I think it's Olkaya, is an immigrant. He came from Turkey, and he actually came from a family, if I'm not mistaken, of like goat farmers, and moved to upstate New York. And he had an opportunity to buy a defunct yogurt factory and wound up becoming one of the biggest producers of Greek yogurt in the world, not just in the US. I think today they have $100.5 billion in sales. They have multiple facilities. And in addition to having a great product, he has been incredibly outspoken about immigrants and the power of immigrants and hiring immigrants and immigrant entrepreneurs and how immigrants contribute to society. And it definitely speaks to me on a personal level. Whether or not I like the product, I have an affinity and an association with this brand for positive social change and for my own affinity for my own personal political views. Who would think that a yogurt maker is going to be the spokesperson for immigration in the US? He did not have to put it out there. He did not have to make that connection. And I think it's an incredibly powerful message that he chose to take this personal passion of his and make it part of the brand. Will that influence, again, who buys or who doesn't buy his product? It probably will. It can be a catalyst, or it can be something that could, again, obstruct the kind of sales that he might. I'm not sure if they're buying Chobani for the White House commissary, but they are probably buying it in other places.
That's really funny.
Okay. All right, Levi's. This I thought was really interesting. So I don't know if any of you have heard, but the CEO of Levi's came out with, he did an op-ed, I think it was in the New York Times, that Levi Strauss is going to be supporting a number of causes against gun violence. And this was really, I think, surprising to a lot of people based on the history of Levi's and the whole brand around kind of being a cowboy and this Midwestern values and all of these things. But in the op-ed, the CEO, Chip Berg, talked about an incident where a customer came into a store of theirs, actually had a gun, a concealed weapon, legally, and accidentally shot himself. He didn't die, thank God, nothing happened, nobody else was hurt. But that prompted him 2 years ago to issue a statement to say, it doesn't matter if it's legal in that state, we don't want any guns on our premises or in our stores, asking all customers to not bring weapons into a Levi's stores. He got death threats from people for daring to say this.
I would think so, though. I mean, that's what I'm from the South. I should preface it with that. I'm from Louisiana. I own a house in Texas. People that carry guns wear Levi's.
Yes. Yes.
So, how did he miss that memo?
So he didn't miss the memo. He didn't miss the memo, but he has a social conscience. And he basically has said that he has seen too many events that have impacted either his employees, their families, their loved ones, and he does believe in responsible gun ownership, but he also believes in responsible gun control. So,
and if anybody could influence it, it's him,
yes.
right? Because he has literally the pants.
Absolutely, of everyone. That's a good slogan. I like that. I think we should send it to him. But he is supporting Michael Bloomberg's initiative, which is Everytown Business Leaders for Gun Safety. So they are supporting that organization. They are giving their employees 5 hours a month volunteer time to support anti-gun violence causes, whether they want to volunteer. They've donated over $1 million in grants to a variety of organizations that support gun legislation. So he is really putting his money where his mouth is. This letter was just published in September. And this is actually a headline that came from the NRA site. And if you read this particular article, the NRA is not happy, as you can imagine, about it. But I think it'll be interesting to see for a brand like this what happens over time, because it does seem to have this tension with the origins of the brand, and can they change, and can a leader be the one to shift the DNA of this brand for the greater good. So it's very interesting. He does note, however, even in his op-ed, that they also, this is the first time Levi's has gotten involved in activism, and even in some surprising ways. They were one of the first companies back in the 90s to recognize same-sex partners for insurance purposes, for benefits purposes. They actually stopped financial support for the Boy Scouts of America when they started banning gay leaders, also in the early 90s. So it's not the first time Levi's has done this. I think it's the first time, though, it's been so vocal and public, yes. Okay, I also want to share it doesn't have to be big business only that focuses on branding. This is actually a photograph that was taken by a photographer who's local in my small town in New Jersey. Her name's Meg Bitton. She's an incredible photographer, and she was really well known for doing kind of newborn shots or children's photography, only in our town, not so big. And she took a picture of this young transgender woman. Her name is Corey Mason. This was about 2 years ago, and Corey lives in the town and wanted to have her photograph taken, wanted to feel feminine, wanted to feel like a girl in every way possible. Meg took this great photograph of her, and when the controversy in North Carolina came out about legislation where transgender individuals would have to use the bathrooms of their sex that was named on their birth certificate and not how they identified, Corey and her family, along with Meg, decided to try to promote their view on this cause, that it was unfair, and should this young woman have to go into a bathroom with men because that's what it says on her birth certificate. And obviously, as a young teen, she has not yet had reassignment surgery. So this sparked a ton of controversy. You can imagine that people are very vocal and very divergent in their views on this topic. And she became, on the one hand, reviled by a number of groups who attacked not only Corey but Meg for taking her photograph and for promoting it. And on the other hand, she got more new business out of it than she ever had in her life, because there were people who wanted to support this cause and were absolutely enamored with what she was doing for this young woman. And this isn't the first time, this was the first time that Meg really dipped her foot into this, but now she was so, I guess, inspired by it that she does a lot of work to also support causes for anti-sex trafficking or for LGBTQ rights. And this small town photographer has become such a huge advocate for these causes, and it has now become so much a part of her brand and who she is. I'll use this other small example. Patrice Tanaka, who's a friend of mine, started this company called A Joyful Planet. She wrote a book about being joyful. She was a serial entrepreneur. She had a number of businesses. Tragically, her husband died about a decade ago, and she went through kind of a transformational moment, and she chose joy. Personally, she decided this was not going to be the end of her life, but this was going to be the beginning of a new chapter of her life. She took up ballroom dancing. She started learning how to be a life coach, both to coach herself and to coach other people. She's an inspirational speaker. Everywhere Patrice goes, it is like sunlight has hit the room at decibels no one has seen before. It's really incredible. And she has created this whole brand around joy and living a joyful life, whether it's at work or at home or in any other environment. So you don't have to be a giant corporation to figure out branding. You can even be a small business. I know we're tight on time, so we'll try to get through a few more. So one of the things I think most people think about when they think about branding is they start with the name and they start with the mark, but they don't think about all of the other components that kind of go into the brand. So one of the things that I would do is challenge you to think about what are all the other things that I want to be part of my brand, and not just focus on the mark or the business card, and that's where your branding ends. So mission, vision, values, there are plenty of examples, and I can send you these slides. Don't have to. You can take photos, but I'll send you the slides if you want them. I think that's really important to start with. And what are the key messages for your brand? What are the things that you want to stand for? I thought it was interesting when we were talking about Hint. I was privy to kind of a sideline conversation where somebody asked her about, are you going to infuse your water with CBD oil or these other marijuana products that are now very popular? And she mentioned that because marijuana doesn't taste good when you drink it, you have to sweeten it. And part of their brand is no sweeteners. And even though the marijuana part is natural, if they're going to add it into the water, they're going to have to use a sweetener, so they're going to not look at it unless they can change that. And I think, again, what are those brand pillars? What are the things or the principles by which you operate or run your company are going to be very important. Who's your target audience? One of the things in the latest controversy, because Meg does stir up controversy with the photography, she gets death threats. She does, unfortunately, and she gets hate mail, and she gets written up on these what I would call fringe, but very right-wing conservative blogs, attacking her views and attacking her as an individual. And although she worries about it to a degree, as anybody would, the one thing I always say to her is, this is not your audience. And the people who read this and the people who follow this woman are not your audience. You don't need to worry about them, because they never will be, and they never were going to be your clients. So if your focus is your business, you can also segment who is your audience and who are you talking to. Tone of voice can also be part of the brand. I swear like a truck driver. I try not to in public places, but it's part of my DNA and who I am, and I'm a straight talker, and I don't know how to sit on my hands and not say what I feel and not let it out. So it is part of who I am. And when we talk about our company and how we present and how we work with companies, if we have someone who comes in and says, I just want you to execute this, I don't want to hear your ideas, I know what I'm going to do, this is how I want, I'm like, we're not the company for you. Like, we're not, because we can't do that. That's not who we are. So knowing your tone of voice, knowing your approach, along with all the other visual elements. And then personal and business platforms or causes. You do not have to make it all one. You don't have to be the Warren Buffett or the Microsoft, but you can separate the two. You can decide these are the personal causes I care most about, and these are the things that the business cares about. And especially if you have partners or other people in the organization that perhaps don't share your views, or many organizations, I think, are hesitant to lean in one direction or another, whether it's politically or based on religious beliefs. So you can separate those, but I think it's important to make a conscious decision about separating those. And then how do you actually go out and promote your brand? So this is a little hard to read, so I actually have copies. I can share these with you. Bear with me a moment, if you wouldn't mind passing this out. But I don't know if you have heard of the peso model, but this is kind of a way of looking at a variety of ways of branding your company. Once you have that branding, is it earned? In other words, are we not paying for it? Okay, do we earn it by talking to the media, getting someone to write about us, being invited to speak at an event? But I didn't pay for any of it. Earned to me is the holy grail. It's also the most important, especially if you're bootstrapping in an organization. Shared means that the property that you're using is probably partially owned by you, partially owned by somebody else. So, for example, social media, I can use Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, but I don't own the platform. And the truth is, I don't own the page either. Anyone who's ever been banned or had an issue on any of those platforms, they find out the hard way. And then what do I own? I own my website. I own the experience when you come into my store. I can own the product? What are all of the things that I have kind of complete control over, so to speak? And paid, these are the things that I pay for. So it could be influencer marketing, it could be advertising, it could be sponsorships or other methods of promotion. So I would encourage you to think about, once you have defined all of these elements of your brand, how are you then going to communicate that to the market? How are you going to share that? And this is a good kind of starting point to think about it, because it's not just one vehicle.
Quick question.
Yes.
Where does organic marketing fit in here?
Organic marketing? Well, give me an example of what you mean by organic marketing.
Maybe like, for example, you have something and you are trying to get, instead of having like a big ad or flyers, you just go mouth to mouth or to begin with.
Sure. So it would probably be somewhere between shared and earned, because if I earn your trust and you recommend me, it's like recommendations, then I earned it and I didn't have to pay for it. But if it was likes on social or shares on Twitter or something else, then I would kind of call that shared as a platform. Because one of the things that happens with shared media, like Facebook changes its algorithm and suddenly you're nowhere to be found if you have content or a community. So you don't have complete control over that platform or what happens to it. Yes, it can be. I won't go through these in details, but if you do want copies of the slides, I just kind of outlined for you all of the different elements that I look at, and many of these things you can do in-house internally yourself. And when you get to a certain size or when you're ready, you may want to bring in partners or professionals to help you with it. So from a marketing standpoint, social media, community management, events, PR, again, that's where the earned kind of, it's all free. You just have to spend time and maybe a little blood and sweat, hopefully no tears, to achieve that, but that can be very impactful. I'll give you two quick stories on this. I have one client who I adore, who I started working with literally when he just had the idea and like just quit his job. And he was looking to disrupt the retail industry with predictive marketing, so predicting what you'll buy, when you'll buy it, how much you'll pay for it. And we had no customers, no products, no really anything to show for it, except he was a really good-looking guy. And he was a Yale graduate, had an incredible personal story, child of immigrants. He was African-American, and he was a tech founder. And we were like, we can work with this. Fantastic. This is all we need from a PR perspective. It's PR gold. We had a profile on him done in GQ magazine. And it basically profiled, what he likes to wear, the brands that he likes, and oh, by the way, he has this company and this vision, and he's going to transform retail. The first call he got was from Barney's New York. That became his biggest customer. The second profile we got for him was in Inc. magazine. He got a call from a potential investor. They put about $7 million into the company before the algorithm was done. So branding can have tremendous impact. The second story I'll give you on the other end of it, so we work, I mentioned, with R. Donnelley, this multi-billion-dollar company, and it's all B2B marketing services. And for many years, they have provided the photo books that were produced by Apple, but Apple decided to remove their brand from the photo books and allow other vendors into the system, so that if you're using Apple Photos or storing your photos and you want to produce a photo book, you now can choose from a variety of vendors. And R. Donnelley was scared out of their minds. They're going to lose millions of dollars worth of revenue because nobody knows who R. Donnelley is. So they created a brand called Motif, and we helped launch the brand. And in launching the brand was really critical that when consumers got to that choice that Apple gave them of which photo book company do you want, they were going to choose Motif, and they were going to download the Motif app and not any of the other apps. And with every article that was published about Motif, they were able to tell us exactly how many downloads they had that day from that article. And it was a great catalyst to say, look how it is driving business. Because they were able to say to us, okay, we got 1,000 downloads from that. A lifetime customer is worth about $120. Let's multiply that. That's how much this article is worth to us in terms of business. We need 10 more. Let's triple the budget that we're spending on PR. And that's how we go. So it can have a tremendous impact. The last thing I'll say is your brand is alive. It's not set in stone. So even if you have a lot of like fear about, putting it down on paper and closing the book, you should leave the book open. Your brand will evolve over time. You will evolve over time. Who I was as a business owner 16, 17, almost years ago is not the same as who I am today. The company has changed as well. But you need to have a framework. You need to have a starting point and then build from there. And if you have that strong foundation, it makes it that much easier to get everyone else on board with that same mission and that same passion and that same sense of direction of where you want the company to go. So that's my message for you. Sorry, I tried to slide through those last few slides. But I will be here if you guys have questions. I'm happy to help. And if you want a copy of the slides, just you can tap me or I'll give you a card and email me, and I'm happy to share those as well. But I hope you found that helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes, of course.
So if we need to convert and do these things that you asked, would you recommend ripping the Band-Aid off and just coming out with the solid brand, or incorporate small changes over time?
I think it also depends on how visible is your brand, right? So if you currently have 1 million customers, you probably want to make the change in one fell swoop, because it probably means you need to change your product, you need to change your business cards, you need to change the sign on the door. You have invested so much in this brand that it's very, very expensive to change things slowly or do multiple iterations. But if you're a small organization, maybe you don't have all the money to do it right now, then making small incremental changes will probably not have a big impact on your business. I definitely think that that's possible. And if you're somewhere in the middle, we're there right now as a company. We want to change our branding and our messaging, and we're like, okay, let's tally it up. We've got to do all of these 50 things. What's mission critical that has to get done, what would be nice to get done, and what we'll do with our Christmas bonus if there is one. So you have to figure that out as well. Okay, thank you. All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.